I believe that's me now. So one of the things that we wanted to do a little bit before we move into our keynote is to kind of explain to everyone why we are doing this, why we created the Breaking Barrier series. And at this time, I think it's been mentioned that this is our third event that we're doing in this way. We are doing it a little bit later in the fall semester than we had anticipated, recognizing that we are very close up to against the holidays, and so some portions of our activities over the next 2 days will be recorded. And we're also live streaming, so folks can connect and engage in various ways with us. We started this last year in amidst the pandemic. As many of you may be aware, and that you, if you're not familiar with Chain University, we are the oldest and the first HBCU, founded back in 1837. When I came to Chain University, it was very important for us to be able to showcase the excellence, especially amongst our diverse communities with our faculty, staff, and students, and especially with where the university was heading strategically, with doing a transformation. And we had just created our Institute for Contemporary African American Experience. And the purpose of that institute was to really look at solutions for contemporary problems affecting communities of color. So when we launched the Breaking Barrier series back in 2020, we wanted to do that to most definitely be able to educate and promote diversity, equity, and inclusion across an academic landscape. Can I have the next slide, please? So the purpose of our academic conference for this year, this one in the fall, we'll also host another one in the spring, is really centered around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the STEM area, right? We see diversity as the goal. We see equity as being a process vehicle, and the ultimate outcome is inclusion. And so we are mounting these various workshops to be able to help both faculty and students of color when they're thinking about their career or their scholarship within a STEM discipline, to be able to better support them as they move along with their respective or individual pursuits. We want to make sure that the systemic, the traditional types of barriers that have existed, that we are part of that solution in terms of breaking those barriers. Can I have the next slide, please? If I were to look at our conference objectives, of course, this is a national conference. Last year, we had participants from over 70 various institutions that engaged with us. This year, I'm not quite sure how many various institutions we're able to reach out to, but please know that everyone has been invited. Folks from other HBCUs, other minority serving institutions. Cheney is a part of the Pennsylvania State System of Education, so our sister institutions have been invited. We've invited folks from community colleges. We've invited participants who are at various stages in their academic as well as their scholarship pursuits, including for this time, for the first time, we will hear from students who are aspiring STEM researchers, will be able to present to us, and we'll be able to provide them with some valuable feedback as they themselves are beginning on this journey as well. We are hoping that our lessons learned will be able to be shared, right? Each one help one. The theme for this year is mentorship and building authentic relationships. And so in our engaged activities for this year, we are most definitely focused on being able to help each other. And we're going to be doing this in utilizing a format that's called Racial Healing Circles. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that. But back in 2016, Dr. Gail Christopher invented or spearheaded the Racial Healing Circles nationwide to help various communities get together to really start that systemic breaking of barriers. We're going to be borrowing some of those concepts this year in order to engage with others to be able to help as we continue to build our network and to focus on authentic relationships. Can I have the next slide, please? So I'm hoping that everyone saw the agenda that's been posted in the chat, but this kind of gives you an idea of what today will look like. And then tomorrow, of course, we'll get you another update so that you are able to follow along. We will have participants dropping in and out. We have some folks who are still ending their semesters and trying to post final grades and get those last minute things in to close up their semester. So they'll be engaging at various times throughout today and tomorrow with us. But just to give you an idea of what we will be doing, very shortly, we will be hearing from Dr. Velma Scantlebury, who is the first Black female transplant surgeon. And then we will also have an opportunity today to hear about various funding opportunities from our friends at NSF. Program officers will present a little bit on their respective programs so that folks can have an idea of various research opportunities that's out there for them to be able to pursue. And then even later on in this afternoon, we will be able to have 2 feature presentations that will run concurrently. Folks will be divided into participating and engaging with either one, because they will be repeated again tomorrow, so that if you chose, for instance, to attend with Dr. Vivian Jones today, then you most certainly will not be able to miss Dr. John Lewis tomorrow, and vice versa. We're also going to be hearing from one of our aspiring student STEM researchers on her pathway to neuroscience, and that will be facilitated by Dr. Amy Liu from Kutztown University. And then we'll end the day with a breakout with our racial healing circles, just being able to get into a smaller type of space, much like our breakout rooms, so that we can begin to share some personal stories and hear from you about your various challenges, so that we're able to see how best we might be able to assist each other in terms of breaking through some of those barriers for you. Some of our key presenters today, as I mentioned, Dr. Velma Scantlebury. We'll also be hearing from Dr. Jones and Dr. Lewis with their respective research projects and how they're going. And closing us out tomorrow will be Mr. Arthur Mitchell, who is the Executive Director of STEM Equity Alliance, and he's really going to help us frame various equity practices that have been followed, that need to be followed, and some of the things that we need to be doing. Remember, we mentioned that we see equity as this process vehicle for helping us achieve that outcome to get to that goal of diversity. We have some other presenters and facilitators as well from NSF. If we can progress to the next slide, we'll see some pictures to match with names when they're able to join us. They're from the various directorates, and they're very eager to share with us different research opportunities. So as we are thinking about our respective interests and where we might need to take ourselves to advance our career or to further the discipline, some of these opportunities are available and out there. We want people to be aware of them so that we have more applications and more people applying to take advantage of these opportunities. One of the things that we're doing with the Breaking Barriers Network is being able to assist, with even from the very beginning, with identifying the opportunities and helping with that that grant pursuit or that grant application or that grant project in any way that we can. That's one of the facets of the Breaking Barriers Network. And so you being a part of it, we will most definitely be able to assist in that way. I did mention that we also have student presenters. And so we will be able to hear from 3 of our students on their respective pathways along the lines of different STEM disciplines, and also hear from them in regards to their own initial research. Hopefully we're able to share and encourage them in some way, and hear from them about their challenges and what we might be able to help them to overcome as well. So that in essence gives you a sense for the program, why we've put it together, why you've been invited to be a part of our program. And we are really, really excited to have you and to also hear from our respective presenters as we use the next 2 days in order to share this wonderful opportunity with you. I will pause here so that we can introduce our keynote. And I will ask Lauren if she can help us with Dr. Scantlebury's bio, and then we will hear from Dr. Scantlebury.
Thank you, Ms. Morris, for introducing Breaking Barriers to us. I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Velma Scantlebury. Dr. Scantlebury earned her medical degree from Columbia University in New York City. She was an intern and resident in general surgery at Harlem Hospital in New York City. She completed her fellowship training in transplantation surgery at the University of Pittsburgh, and then joined the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine as an assistant professor of surgery in 1989. She rose to the rank of associate professor prior to her appointment at the University of South Alabama's Regional Transplant Center in Mobile, Alabama, where she served as professor of surgery, director of the kidney transplant program, and assistant dean of community education. Dr. Scantlebury's special interests include researching the end results of donation and transplantation in African Americans, increasing organ donation in the African American community through education and awareness, increasing the incidence of living donor transplantation by education, and treating viral infections in kidneys. Without further ado, here's Dr. Velma Scantlebury.
Thank you so much. This is a great opportunity for me to be part of this panel. And so I welcome the opportunity to talk to you about science and breaking barriers in medicine as well as STEM. So I'm going to share my slides and go to full screen. Are you seeing the full screen?
It's the presenter's notes.
Okay.
So if you just stop the share and reshare it.
Okay, let me, I think there's another option. Okay. And reshare. Still not seeing it, right?
Not yet.
I said share. Let's see.
Yep.
You have the right slide now?
Yes, you're good to
Okay,
go.
thank you. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And so, what is STEM? I know the NSF is here, but I also want to know that initially it was SMET, which to reflect the standards in science, math, engineering, and technology, and was then changed over to STEM in 2001 by Judith Ramsey. And so you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that was interesting. I've always had an interest in STEM. And we know that the STEM occupations are continue to grow in this country. And for those of you who are not aware, those who in STEM who have STEM degrees actually make higher income. I think STEM is important because it's the jobs of the future, and it really is about understanding, having that basic understanding of math and science. And one of the areas where we can help bridge the ethnic and gender gaps that they're often found within math and science, and also the traditional gender roles. And I have to say, as a surgeon, just growing up, it was, your typical white male was viewed as a surgeon. And even as a resident in training, it was always generally from patients who wanted to know when was the real doctor going to come take care of them, because you have that image of white males being the surgeon. And in surgery itself, there is very little diversity. Diversity matters within the scientific community, not just in medicine, but in science in general. And it helps to have people of different backgrounds, cultures, and to embrace our differences in order for us to be strengthened by that diversity. And so one of the things for me was always seeing our colleagues, when you think of scientists, or even on the television, when you Google and look at images, you see predominantly white males. And so where are we in this picture as minorities? And even white males, Asian women, we need more minorities and people of color. Within my own training, it was obvious for many years, even in my residency, I was in Harlem, we had many females and many Black females, but going over to a specialty in transplantation, I was the only female. And obviously I was the first Black female. It took many years before we were able to get to a second Black female. And the lack of people of color within the science fields is quite obvious. When we look at those in science and engineering occupations, in 2015, we look at the US population, certainly compared to these numbers on the right to those on the left, certainly the white men and white women dominate, followed by Asian men within the science and engineering occupations. And when we look at Black men and women, Hispanic numbers are generally less than 5%, less than 3%, 2% for women, Black women. So there certainly is area for improvement, and to be able to figure out how do we get our numbers into the pipeline. And so there certainly is a leaky pipeline, even from middle school, as we will see going on, even at the level of academic careers at university to research, to career advancement. We find that there is less than 5% when it comes to women, and also for people of color. And this falls off because of either we'll go through later lack of interest, lack of opportunity, and lack of funding. And so it's upon us to figure out how to get there. I was one of those who from high school to university was told to get a job and not to pursue college, maybe night school, because the perception was I didn't look like the one who would succeed in college. I had parents and family who were insistent for me going to college. I was going to be the first person to complete college in our family, having immigrated from Barbados. And so that was not an option for me. I ended up applying to 2 colleges, got a full scholarship to Lyon University, which was a few miles from my house, excelled, made a dean's list every year and every semester, and went on to medical school, only to be told that I didn't have what it took to be a surgeon. So we get that discouragement along the way. And so it becomes important for us to be supported and to be there to get to that higher level of professorship or leadership, or to have that career opportunities. Because despite what we see today of many people entering medical school, we'll see later, we still have less than 5% of African-American physicians in this country. So we are immersed in the cultural conditioning from the minute we are born. But the minute we decide to wrap this baby in a pink blanket or a blue blanket, we're setting a stage for what they see and how they're conditioned, because that is what they're exposed to. Does it really matter whether, why not just put them in a yellow blanket if they're so, is it just who is going to be a boy and who's going to be a girl? And so we have that influence even in toys. We have toys that are geared for girls and toys that are geared for boys. Now, why does this little nurse toy is all in pink and she can be a nurse, but it's the male who gets to be the junior doctor? Why is that? So we're conditioning our kids. You know, there was one saying that if the toy is not a toy that needs to be operated by your genitalia, then it's not really a boy toy, a girl toy. It should just be a toy. So we condition our kids, and we see here on this, when you look at 4-year-olds watching television, 1 hour of TV, they have no preference in terms of toy preference, male, female, or neutral, but give them 2 hours or more of television per day, and suddenly they're more in tune with what's the male toy, what's the female toy. And so we have these standards that we are throw to our younger generation and our young preschoolers about what is fit for a male and what's fit for a female. And social media can pull down your self-esteem. It tells you what you're not good enough to do. You look on there and you see that you're given a score depending on what kind of things you like or you don't like, and it may have negative effects. We're grateful for when we look at the television shows that there are some women, we have underrepresentation, but we still have many who are able to be shown as scientists, and less than 14% of television shows portray women in science, and even though it's probably less than what's naturally out there. But even we're glad for those who, while we look in this picture, we don't see a whole lot of minorities, but even women struggle overall in terms of being portrayed in media as scientists. So when we look at the STEM facts, we know that only 1/3 of 8th graders are interested in STEM majors. And the Department of Education data show that 60% of high school students are interested in STEM, have proven proficiency. But while they have that interest, as high school freshmen, they lose interest before they graduate, and only 6% of high school seniors would get a bachelor's degree in STEM field, and 16% of all degrees are specialized in STEM. So we need to spark this interest. We need to continue to advocate. And so is it that they're incapable of succeeding? Do they feel socially unwelcome? Is it lack of interest? Certainly fewer role models. And we know that there's limited access to good education can often be part of that factor in exposure. And schools that serve minority and lower income neighborhoods have less opportunity for students of color or students in general to have access to college programs. One of the things that's important even for me in terms of in college was getting that mentoring in knowing what I can do to booster my skills in order to get accepted to medical school. What do I need to succeed? And so those are crucial things for us to understand. How do we mentor our young people so that they're not on the lopsided end of those who are scientists? And so preparation, understanding, and exposure is key. Being able to take part in those high school programs. I had opportunities to shadow many physicians during my high school years, because volunteering and having that exposure is key. Being able to see how others do it, being able to understand what it takes to be a physician or a scientist. I think those are our key opportunities for our young people to get there. So representation of women in STEM in the media also matters. We know that when we look at streaming in terms of white in purple and black in blue representation in television definitely affects how we see ourselves, because that's where our young people are geared to, those in the media. And when we look at this list, when we look at the percentage of STEM characters for people of color, it's not climbing, it's actually decreasing over years. And so STEM leaders who are white women and women compared to women of color, 2% compared to 11%. And we're grateful for Black Panther Cherise to be able to portray a wonderful scientist, and who many young people are able to say, I can see someone that looks like me, I can be someone that looks like me. And that's so very important for us to be able to understand that there are opportunities out there that we need to take advantage of. One of the things for me was knowing that even applying to in terms of doing my general surgery at Harlem Hospital, there were many African Americans. It was certainly a melting pot, and you didn't see the challenges because you see people succeeding. Went on to University of Pittsburgh, and then there at that university there were no people of color. There were no Black surgeons in general. Even within the medical department, there were no physicians of color. So it was certainly, when you feel alone with lack of social support, lack of representation in terms of knowing who to turn to, it becomes crucial to be able to in order to feel included. You may be present, but you may not be included. And that is something that we need to feel engaged, and we need to feel like we're part of the establishment. And when we look at data, looking at the lack of encouragement and poor education as reasons for African Americans and Hispanics being underrepresented, we find that majority have felt like they had less likely to have access to quality education to prepare them. So those early years of representation, finding those summer programs, being able to have sponsors and mentors and teachers that push us in the right direction, or young people in the right direction, to be able to have that exposure is key. Not encouraged to pursue these subjects from an early age. For me, I knew I wanted to be a surgeon from the first day I entered medical school, gross anatomy class, and the ability to dissect the body and to be able to see all the different parts of the body and to understand that this is what makes this works. And I did well in surgery, and I saw myself as a surgeon. But when it came time to apply for residency, I was told I didn't have what it took to be a surgeon. I wasn't your typical appearing person. I was Black, I was female, I wasn't white, and I wasn't male. And things like, you're too short. Well, there are men who stand on stools who are short surgeons. That didn't matter for them. And so it's that negative perception. So we need to encourage. And for me, I was very determined and stubborn. So I was going to pursue surgery regardless, knowing that it was not going to be an easy feat without their recommendation. And so I didn't match, but I didn't let that discourage me, because I had rotated at Harlem Hospital, and I had a mentor there who brought me on, and I ended up doing my residency at Harlem Hospital because someone felt that I had likelihood of succeeding. I had rotated there as a medical student. And so when someone believes in you, and when someone feels like you are likely to have what it takes to be a successful, they're going to encourage you. So certainly that's key in terms of moving on in being able to achieve your goals. We all face discrimination in hiring and promotion. And when we look at people of color, we're certainly underpaid. We often have to take the longest journey to professorship. And when we look at people of color, or at least women who are chairmen of surgeries in this country, until 2021, we had 0. And suddenly over the last 6 months, we have been able to have 2 women as chairpersons of Department of Surgery. So we're certainly breaking barriers, but there's still a lot to go. And so having role models is important, and also being able to more in the fields to be able to mentor and bring others along. And so when we look at the distribution of median earnings by sex of full-time employed workers within STEM in 2019, with the dark blue being men, light blue being women, and we look at pay scale, we see that certainly overall for STEM fields, when we look at the pay as we go, certainly the women, the light blue are always seem to be behind the dark blue. And so women are certainly underpaid when it comes to STEM fields. And even when we go into those who are engineers and different mechanical engineers, chemical engineers, civil engineers, pay scale is constantly. So women are certainly being underpaid, and that's part of the barrier that we need to begin to break in terms of getting more women into higher C-suite positions so that they can influence and be part of the solution in terms of breaking these barriers. And sometimes we all know in our daily life, we pass examples of things and you wonder, did they have a woman on this team when they designed this? Oftentimes, and even within our clinical situation of the hospital, there are no bathrooms anywhere in the hallways. And so you wonder, patients are constantly asking, where's the nearest bathroom? And I often have to say, they didn't likely have a woman on the design team when they did this architectural design, because they would probably have had a more diverse thought into the outcomes. And so there are often those, you wonder, whose idea was this when you see crazy things, maybe diversity on this team would have resulted in a better outcome. We all know in science, we thought the earth was flat. It turned out not to be true. You go to, this is actually, you wonder, here's another engineering mistake architecturally. It was a nice thought, but this is where diversity matters in terms of having being able to avoid these awful mistakes. And this one I thought was a science project, how you make breast milk into good tractor fuel. Now, I wanted to say, obviously there was not a lot of diversity of thought that went into that, but, and certainly we need to ingenuity, but we certainly it's kind of lopsided there. So turning to medicine, we know that for the first time ever, we've got a majority of medical students are women, and we have an increase in the number of Hispanic, Latin, and Spanish students entering medical school, 3.2% in African-American matriculants, and 5.5% Indian Native, Alaska Native. And so, yes, we have more women, but what's the makeup of these when we look at overall? And certainly their majority are going to be population-wise in blue, and medical students primarily is going to be white and Asian. We still have low numbers when we look at African Americans, Hispanics, and American Indians. So we are increasing, but our numbers are still small. And the majority are made up by those who already dominate the field of medicine, which are Asians and Caucasians. And when we look at all active physicians by race and ethnicity, Blacks still make up about 5%, with Black males about 3%, and Black females about 2%. And so these are numbers that we need to increase, because we're still seeing certainly this being white, followed by Asian. And so we are still being left behind even within the field of medicine. And it becomes important, even for me as a transplant surgeon, it's been over 30 years since I've practiced. And even in terms of women, 30 years later, we only have 12 Black female transplant surgeons, with the bulk of the 8 coming within the last 10 years. And certainly it's important to begin to challenge and make a presence known for us to be able to break these barriers. And, we see many topics out there when we come to underrepresentation. of minorities in surgical residency. As we get into the subspecialties, there are less and less of us. Oftentimes, we know that there is certainly a leaky pipeline when it comes to specialties beyond internal medicine and getting minorities or people of color in surgical residencies. And those who are able to get into a residency, though the percentage of those who do not make it through for the 5 or 7 years is significantly high. And we find that when we look at numbers for, especially in surgery for people of color, they don't make it, keeping them matriculating through the whole program becomes difficult. And that's where mentorship and representation, being able to have someone who's your ally, looking out for you, becomes important. Faculty, or having faculty on staff, is important. And we know this across all STEM. We know that when we look at engineering and science, most of those go into private industry. So if they're not on staff in schools and colleges and graduate school, then you don't have that mentorship. You don't have that person to look up to. So yes, academics is not where you make the money, but it is where you stimulate others and where you begin to be seen and where you can make a difference in the lives of all those who are interested in that subject. There's now a focus on Black men in medicine, and the drive is to diversify the future of healthcare, because when we look at more women entering medical school, the men are being left behind. And it becomes important for us to be able to support that cause and that initiative in being able to bring that to focus. And certainly, as we said before, women and minorities surgical are at high risk of withdrawing from training because there's lack of support. They're usually the only ones, or just maybe one or two. And so when you are in that field alone without good mentorship or social support, it becomes crucial to be able to reach out to others and be able to have a network for understanding and for really able to see that you're not alone in your struggle as we face discrimination, as we face all the racial difficulties that we have to face, even in being in the OR, being seen not as surgeons, or being seen as the social worker or the dietitian. So many times I wear my white coat only to stand out, but generally I'm the other person. So, it becomes difficult to be recognized, and it's important for us to be able to support each other in this cause. There's a short series on Black men in white coats, which is now become a documentary or film, and it discusses a lot of the issues facing men in science. And so if you haven't had a chance to see it, there's a series of episodes documenting their journey. I welcome you to take a look at that. So when we look at how do we break down some of these barriers in STEM, and I think we want to foster the ambition of young people so that they can see the possibilities ahead. I was grateful for my family, who was able to support my cause and my determination to become a doctor. And so that's so very important. And the negativity that surrounds us can often be overbearing. And it becomes important to know that we all have those possibilities. We just need opportunity to take advantage of those possibilities. And with that, we can close the gender gap and perhaps break down the stereotypes that hiding the pressure to be perfect and do contribute to the lack of confidence. I was told when I got to medical school that I was there because they wanted token Blacks. But that was going to be my way to my career, even if it meant not being on the typical journey landscape. But so being in medical school was also something that was difficult because I had trouble studying. And we all may fail sometimes, but you have to realize that failure is not the end of the world. You can use that failure as a stepping stone and another way to elevate yourself to become successful, and to know that it may just delay you somewhat, but it can heighten you and it can give you that drive to do better the next time. In terms of access, the biggest career disadvantage I think facing many low-income minorities is limited access to a good education. We need better funding in schools, lack of enriching programs, and aid in the development of cognitive and analytical skills. That early development is key. And so it's important when we think about our young people, our young kids, what are we stimulating them with? What are we allowing them to see, and how are they being groomed in terms of their development to really see these fields as possible? And so even in the kind of toys we give them, as I saw before, how do we stimulate their brain, get them away from the television and begin to get them into these programs that will put them on the right path? And so when we look at a study, it looked at Pew Research Center survey, looking at science knowledge and the variation of this knowledge by race and ethnicity in the United States. And we find that, yes, it does matter, our knowledge base. And so we want to be able to say, when it comes to life sciences, we want these numbers when we look at Black responses for knowledge on a broad scale, being able to identify and know these answers and be having a greater understanding. We have to increase this knowledge. We have to understand the basic things that go into overall science knowledge so that we can begin to have our young people be able to be successful. So these are challenges that we have to make and to correct in order for us to have a better base of understanding of math and science for our communities of color. And opportunities are important. We have to be able to put our young people into these summer programs and opportunities to learn more about STEM and STEAM, looking at organizations that will be able to provide resources, look at the way we gift and how we encourage our young people to think analytically and cognitively in their development stages. And so besides ambition and access, resources are important. Federal funding for early education studies that know that if you invest in preschool and improving preschool education, we can really make a dent in education later on. So these are opportunities that a lot of our inner city schools lack because the funding goes to schools that are in the suburbs. And so it's crucial to look at the way our students are taught. Not everyone learns on the same level. And that's one of the things that is changing even in medical school curricula now in terms of book learning, but being able to have that simple education and that book education be coupled with clinical knowledge and being able to see it in a setting where it makes sense and be able to apply it to a clinical setting has been shown to be better. And so not everyone is able to sit at a desk and absorb the material and retain it and use it successfully. So certainly there's money out there for STEM grants and seed money and grant money. And so we have to follow the dollar. We have to follow the dollar and be able to say, how can we bring these funds into communities of color? How can we bring it for access for our young people who are interested and need to be geared towards these kinds of fields? Because yes, this is the future of our country. And so certainly we want to be, representation matters. It has to be more than just a career. You have to be able to think about this. Yes, you need to be at the table. We need to make a difference. And it was Joyce and Ellers that said, you can't be what you can't see. And that is so true. I mean, the more we expose young people to careers in science and math and technology, the more they see themselves as being there. I had an opportunity to work with some students in a community center close here in Delaware, and they all got together and it was a book program, and they asked me many questions, and I showed them pictures of growing up, and so they wrote this book Dr. Velma, the story of Dr. Velma. All the kids drew their diagrams and they wrote, they loved the fact that I came from an island that where Rihanna was born. And so they knew Rihanna. So that was exciting to them. And we invited them to our hospital for a little reception and invited the National Medical Association of doctors and those doctors who were present. And one young man said to me he had never seen a black male doctor before. You know, this was only two or 3 years ago. And so it's important to stimulate these kids from the inner city. They have to be able to know that they can be just like us. They can be successful. And so we don't have enough role models. And I think it's important for us to be able to think about how can we make an impact in our communities? How can we really say, are we present for these young people? Not just in mentorship, but sponsorships are essential because, and not only that academic support, but that social support, because sometimes it is what we know, but it's also who we know. As I often look at some of my peers and looking at my colleagues and their kids graduate college and my kids graduate college, but those in the establishment, their kids are getting jobs on Wall Street, making over $100,000 a year, starting out. But our kids of color are not doing that. So it's really about being able to be in the boardrooms on the golf course, knowing who do you know that would be able to heighten the opportunity for this young man or this young woman? What opportunities are out there besides knowledge to be able to advance them in their career and their understanding? One of the things I say is that while I didn't match, I had an opportunity to be present and to volunteer and to rotate with Dr. Barbara Barlow. And she was the first female surgeon I met as a medical student. And she took me under her wings, and I wanted to be just like her because she was a pediatric surgeon. And I tell others that I was going to be a pediatric surgeon. I was going to come back to Harlem Hospital and took over her job in about 10 years. As I said, where do you see yourself in 10 years? And that was my goal, to be just like her. And because of her, I was able to get a residency in general surgery at Harlem Hospital. And because of her, she picked up the phone and called the chairman of pediatric surgery at University of Pittsburgh so that I could get an interview for pediatric surgery. And while I didn't match in pediatric surgery, he picked up the phone and called Dr. Thomas Starzo, who was head of transplantation surgery, who said, I have a young lady who needs to do some research. She needs more research to become better qualified to become a pediatric surgeon. And he said, sure, I'll take her. And so I got a residency of a fellowship in transplantation surgery to become better qualified to become a pediatric surgeon. And while that didn't occur, it was because of knowing one person having that belief in me and understanding that I have the will and the knowledge to succeed and be having that positivity. So that is so key, and it's so important for us to be able to help each other and to be able to say, what can I do to advance the careers of those who aspire to be scientists and surgeons? And so this was on the opinion page in the New York Times. It says more than half of the American population will make up of minorities by the year 2043. And the number of women who are primary or sole earners continues to grow. And so it becomes imperative that one of the most dynamic sectors of our economy centered around STEM no longer remain a male and largely white and Asian domain. And we have to change that. We have to be able to say, what can we do to move the needle? How do we plug the leaky pipeline? How do we begin to bring our young people through middle school, high school, college, and on through the sciences so that there are not less and less numbers as we get to, yes, it's great that medical school is made up of greater than 50% women, but we still have about 5% of people of color in this country being actively practicing medicine, where we know we're facing racial and health disparities when it comes to outcomes within medicine and even in terms of other fields. So I thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak today and look forward to any questions you may have.
So thank you so much, Dr. Scantlebury, for sharing. I think one of the things that really resonated with me is the quote that you had up there by Joycelyn Elders that says, "You can't be what you can't see." Especially with, I really related to your story because I just remember being in college and trying to really make that final decision in regards to the career pathway that I was going to follow. And there was a registrar at my university, Iris Robinson, a Black female, and I wanted to be her. And I saw what I wanted to be in her, and she was really helpful and instrumental in my career very early with mentoring and helping me to decide. So it is very important for our young people to be able to see themselves in us, as well as to be able to have allies who are able to help our young people, and to be able to even not I would say not even just our young people, but to help others as well to navigate those pathways. I want to open up to see if anybody has any questions for Dr. Scantlebury, or anything that they would want to share. This would be a very good time to pose questions, and let's have some discussions around this.
I had a question. If success was completely guaranteed, what bold steps might we choose? It's for Dr. Scantlebury.
Okay, what bold steps? Certainly it would be making sure that there's others coming along with me. I mean, it certainly is, it's a lonely path being the only one for so many years. And you can be more effective when there's others sharing the stage with you, better ideas, even in terms of diversity, making it available for others to be able to take the same path that you're taking, and inviting others to come along, because the more people we have in terms of representation, the better effect and the better outcomes they are with more people at the table.
Thank you.
I know that Dr. Lewis has his hand up. You want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. That was a wonderful talk, Dr. Scantlebury, and it resonated in many ways. For one, my wife is on the faculty at Pitt Med. I live in Pittsburgh, and she's involved very heavily in social medicine. So so much of what you said resonated. One of the things that I'm going to talk about later today and tomorrow is in my world, which is geoscience, which is the least diverse of the STEM fields, arguably, really, really bad. But the relevance is incredibly clear, but to the people doing geoscience, but not to the population at large. And one of the things that comes up pretty frequently is the idea of a cultural tax, that the people of color that are in these very, very white spaces end up having to do all of the service work and all of the diversity, equity, inclusion work and all the JEDI work. And that's incredibly taxing and unfair and often uncompensated. And so I get one question that I always have when we deal with a space that's so homogeneous from the start, where role models are very hard to come by. How do we best arm the champions who are allies and champions who want to help, but without appropriating too much? I mean, I can bring my voice to things, but I haven't had the same lived experience. So how do we maximize the use of our champions when our starting condition is so homogeneous and there aren't as many role models as we really would like to have? So that's a lot. That's a loaded question. So.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's tough because you, as the only one, or being, you are the representation. You're expected to have all the answers, and you don't have all the answers. And it's really about saying, well, if you want me to take on this new role, then you have to train me. you have to provide opportunity for me to become that expert, because I can't speak for everyone, and that's not my knowledge. But you're invited to be on every committee, and we have a double representation. We've got this Black woman, and she's both Black and female, so we're good. But that doesn't necessarily make you the expert, and that puts so much pressure on being able to be knowledgeable about the area, because everyone is going to turn to you for that expertise. And oftentimes I want to say, I can't be that. You either have to think about hiring someone who is that expert, or be able to take something off my plate so I can go get appropriate training to become that person. But sometimes it's just one, like you said, for no pay. You're asked to step up to the table, but you're not compensated, but you also have to fulfill all your other duties that you're expected to do in order to keep your status and your job. I don't have the right answer, but that would be my, I usually say, send me off to become give me that level of training, but also take something off my plate so that I can be proficient at what you're asking me to do.
And I have a question for you, Dr. Scantlebury, and for others in the audience in their respective roles. I mean, I think some of us have positional leadership at our respective institutions. And so, what's the responsibility of leadership to help with diversity in STEM?
One of the things that has always bothered me is the fact that when you look at the C-suite and the upper committees that are so lacking in diversity, that the decision making is skewed because they don't have that input from someone, because there's there's homogeneity within that decision making. And so it becomes important that if you have an opportunity, and I'm saying something, but I'm also saying contradicting myself, because you do have to make your presence known. You do have to have a voice in that decision making. Something as simple as a recruitment committee or search committee, and an example is hiring a new surgeon or a new faculty person for instance, you are serving a very high underserved population of 60 or 70%, but yet still your staff has no persons of color on it. And so when you recruit, you have to make a cognitive effort to say, what's missing here? Where is representation? And so that oftentimes, being a person who are in a position of influence, you can help bring that focus into the fact that there's not adequate representation here as far as our in terms of, we know that diversity in healthcare affects patients' outcomes. It affects patients how they're treated. So those things become important. And yes, you have to oftentimes speak up if you're in a position to be able to let your voice be heard. If you're a junior faculty and you're in that, you may be less likely to say something because you don't want to endanger your position until you're at a level where you then are either tenured or you're not as bothered by what other people think about you.
I guess I have a question for the audience and the participants. Based on what Dr. Scantlebury presented and shared with us, what surprised you the most?
I think that what surprised me the most, this is Carolyn from Cheney University. What surprised me the most was to know that in this day and age, the numbers of Black and Latinos involved in STEM is still so very low.
Yep.
Yeah, I would second that, particularly the data for Black doctors.
Yep, absolutely. And even though we're pushing medical school, we're finding that even with in 2020, so many Black physicians have decided to leave medicine because of being underappreciated, underpaid, not being respected and feeling like they can make a difference in a better situation. And so it becomes important that we, well, people say they're struggling or trying to achieve diversity, there's no inclusion. And you're just a figure without having an impact in the decision making, or where your voice doesn't really matter from that standpoint, and that becomes crucial.
This is May Stevens. You've shared part of your journey. And I guess my question to you is, you mentioned that your family was supportive, but when were you at your lowest that you are able to pull yourself back up and say, I'm still worthy, and move on? Can you share one of those moments with us?
I would have to say that I was at my lowest as a fellow at the University of Pittsburgh. We had a cohort of 10 fellows who were in training after general surgery. And so now we're doing a specialty in transplant. And I was in my either second year, and trying to think about where I was going beyond that point. We started out with I think 4 women, and 2 fell by the wayside, and it was just myself and a Jewish white female. And there were no other faculty who was of color. And so it was a very lonely situation. And I knew that I was being undermined by all aspects. And I know that for me, I didn't see myself as being even good enough to even get a job. I had lost my self-esteem. And I remember cutting a phrase that says, "Yes, I can," from a magazine to tape to my mirror, to remind myself every day that I could do this. Yes, I can. I'm capable of doing this despite the negativity that was around us. We used to say that our fellowship was about fixing, blame, and criticizing, so we could do nothing right. And I remember being offered some jobs and being told I will never make it, and turning down those jobs because I didn't see that. I was told I needed to hang around to become a better surgeon. And so the negativity was, you can cut it with a knife. And I remember getting so depressed that I didn't know what I should do. And one of my colleagues, we were operating at the table, and he was from South America, and he was talking about how he had to take his Prozac because he needed his Prozac, because at the end of the day, and when he woke up in the morning, he wanted to be able to say, "I don't give a damn," and because of all that was going around. And it made me realize, well, I'm not alone in this, yeah. And no one wants to deal with being depressed and the negativity, but it made me realize that I needed help, and I needed to seek help to get myself out of that lull. That was a very low moment for me, because you can't talk about depression. It wasn't acceptable. People would say, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you'll be better. It took a while, but I was able to overcome that, and found support, social support. My family was in New York, and my husband's family was in North Carolina. And when you're in Pittsburgh, it's out somewhere in the Midwest. And people say, "Oh, it takes too long to get there. I can't come visit." And so that was a low moment for me. And so I have to say, my faith in God and returning to church and finding the other sisterly support was a great opportunity, allowed me to pull through. But that was a low moment for me. I ended up staying in Pittsburgh for many years until I built up enough confidence to look for a job outside of Pittsburgh.
Wow, thanks for sharing.
Absolutely. It does help to have social support. And when you're the only one, without anyone to turn to, it can be very lonesome.
I think I see Dr. Hall.
Yes, ma'am. hearing you speak, Dr. Scantlebury, made me think of something we talked about. We just came out of another conference on Tuesday and Wednesday, and in one of those sessions, a diversity and inclusion session, one of the men was talking about how we do a lot of talk about diversity and inclusion, but one of the things we're not doing is the belonging work. And I thought that that was very powerful, because sometimes we think that when we include people that we've done the work, but have we made them feel like they belong? And a lot of times that's not part of the diversity and inclusion package. And so I think that what happens is when we talk about STEM and we talk about underrepresented areas where we don't see people of color, in particular Blacks and Latinos, the belonging work hasn't happened, especially when we talk about within the context of higher education. People do a lot of recruiting to bring people of color to universities because they've gotten a certain amount of money, but what have they done to make them feel like they belong in that environment? And I think that's where the real work is going to have to begin, by us making people, and it really is not the job of other folks that look like them. You know, we talked about a little bit before, I think that was Mr. Lewis who did a wonderful job of asking about allyship. One of the things about allies is that the work of undoing racism becomes their task and not ours. So that becomes something that holistically has to be worked on if we want to change the trajectory of what was and move into what can be.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. That is so true. On the cover of my book, I have a phrase that says, I was an interloper. I was in, but not a part. And, you know, you really do want to feel like you belong and that your voice matters, what you have to say matter. And so many times I recall even attending transplant conferences where, as a Black female, we are in small numbers and not maybe even 2 or 3 of us among thousands who may show up at one particular meeting or not. And so many times, you know, as a person of Caribbean descent, I tend to wear loud colors. And oftentimes my colleagues that I've worked with in Pittsburgh for 10 to 15 years will walk in the opposite direction and not even see me. And so it would be, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. How did you not see me? I've got this blazing yellow suit on, you know, and your claim is that you don't see me because I'm not essential. I'm not part of your those people you need to recognize. And even for me in the hospital, I'll be rounding and on a medical floor and people will go, well, who are you? And I'm Dr. Scantlebury. Well, how long have you been here? Over 10 years. Oh, I didn't even know you existed. Oh, I didn't even know we had a transplant department. And so it's like, well, is it that you don't want to know? Or because I am not part of your agenda. I am not on your radar to be recognized, and so it becomes annoying because you say, you know, I'm present, and how do I get recognized? How do you see me? So you're not seeing us because you're not visible to them as in level of importance, and so that's oftentimes very difficult. You want to say, hi, I'm here, hear me, see me, yeah.
Dr. Scantlebury, I am Googling you on the internet, and I see one of your books was called Bird Girl, and I guess Wallace was your maiden name.
No, that was not me. Wrong person.
That's not
Sorry.
you? Oh, okay. I'm in the wrong part then. Okay.
Yeah. My book is called Beyond Every Wall, Becoming the First Black Female Transplant Surgeon.
Okay, I see it here. Should we put that in the chat?
Sure, one, two.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's really part of being able to be represented and not just, as you said, you can be hired and it can be part of your D&I, but they have to see you and they have to hear you in order to make a difference. Yeah. Thank you for your questions. That was very informative.
Oh, all right. So this wraps up our first part of our session for this afternoon. We're going to head into a short 15-minute break. And then when we come back around 1:45, we will hear from our folks at NSF, who will talk to us a little bit about various grant opportunities and ways that we can begin to get that financial support needed into the hands of folks who need to explore their various research interests. You know, a lot of times the time and effort to do that is not rewarded at all fiscally. And there are various things out there and various programs out there that are available to do that. I want to thank Dr. Scantlebury for sharing with us your personal journey, as well as so much information on the data that that doesn't seem to be changing much at all, right? And so, you know, we really need to start activating, right? Take this beyond conversations and really start activating so that we can have some of those changes. We need to see those numbers not heading down. You know, we need to see the numbers heading up in terms of representation as our diverse communities achieve success within various STEM disciplines.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
Lauren, I think, is there a different link for our afternoon session that needs to be posted, or can folks just kind of go off screen and mute for a little bit while we might be able to take some bio breaks or grab a drink of water or something like that?
It actually is a separate session, so I'll paste it here. I didn't take the right one. Let's see. To our actual agenda on our site. Our next session has a stream link next to it. I advise you join that way because it'll join you to a separate Zoom link.
Okay, so see everyone again at 1:45 p.m.
Thanks, everyone.